Hi everyone, I'm Hunter Bulkeley, and I'm here to talk to you about a bunch of trees, charity features, and what we've done on one of our games at Tilting Point in how to help the planet overall, and integrating features into your game with profit neutrality. So what we did last year was we integrated a feature into Terragenesis, one of our games, which plants trees based on certain player actions completed in the game. And over the course of the past year, we've planted about 500,000 trees in Mozambique, Madagascar, and a few other countries. And what I want to talk to you guys about is how to leverage basic free-to-play techniques to benefit some sort of actual real-world cause. With profit neutrality, so it actually doesn't cost you anything. Most of the cost is passed on to the player, and your CEOs and finance team don't come down and say, shut down the project, it's costing us way too much money. And the basic steps in order to do that are figuring out how you choose your partner and the cause that you're actually going after, what you actually need to consider when building out a social impact feature as opposed to building a normal feature, and then how do you actually communicate this with your players, which is a little bit different than you do with normal features. And yeah, so the first up, the cause and the partner. So the important thing to remember about this feature is it doesn't matter what you want to do here. You are not the one spending the money, spending the time in actually benefiting the world, it's your players. And so the main focus needs to be on what cause your players actually care about. Rather than something that you want to support because it's good for the planet. And so you got to figure out what do your players actually care about. And so easiest way to do that is just ask your players. Fairly simple. Just run a survey, in-game survey, generate it out to SurveyMonkey, run it a poll on social pages, a lot of different ways there, but you can just directly ask them, list out a whole bunch of different causes. The other way, one way that we went as well, is thematically. You already know your players care about your game because they're playing your game. They downloaded it. They care about whatever the theme of your game is. And so you can tie a cause that matches the theme of your game. For example, Terragenesis, it's a game about taking a barren planet into this lush, garden, beautiful, human-supporting planet. That fits really well with reforestation, which is all about planting trees across a planet. And in one of our games, SpongeBob Krusty Cook-Off, it's a game based on a kid's IP, and it's a cooking game. It made a lot of sense for us to partner with a children's food app, a food company that benefits children. So once you actually have your cause, you need to actually find a partner because you're a gaming company. I know this is shocking, but you are not an expert in actually benefiting the world. We make money from a bunch of people downloading our apps. You are not equipped to deal with government regulations, permits, advocacy groups, mass producing food. I've never worked in the kitchen in my life. You need to find a partner that sole job is leveraging capital towards a specific end and who actually can do that and take that burden off of you. You're the capital source, they're the actual integration and the benefit to the world. And the other thing you need to keep in mind is this is your players' money. This is not your money, this is not your time. You need to make sure that it's going to the right place because your players are trusting you with it. And unfortunately, there are a lot of not the best charities out there or who don't maximize the impact. And so you need to go through the charities and figure out what's the best bang for your buck. Make sure that it's not the money that your players are giving you isn't getting spent on government regulations, government corruption, or getting skimmed off by, unfortunately, the charities themselves to maximize their own bottom line. So you want to make sure that there's a very clear line between your players' money and integration and benefiting the world. The other way to think about it is you're going to have to be working with these people on a day-to-day basis or month-to-month basis. You need a very clear line of communication and very clear established steps of how you're actually going to be working together, like you would with any partner. So the classic way to do this is basically the player spends some money in the game, spends some time in the game, something to that effect, and every week, month, quarter, year, you go through, you run a query and collect all the data and see, okay, this many players completed these actions, this is the trees that I need to plant, then sending the order over to your partner and then they send it over to their partners and integrate it and actually get the benefit out in the world. Other ways, because there are some more tech-savvy charities out there, is that basically the player completes some action, the charity has an actual API and sends it directly to the API, which will send it directly to the charity, who will then put it into the game. Super easy and clean. Depending on how you want to work, how long-term this partner relationship is, and what your goals are, really. So we partnered with a company called Ecology, which you should all check out because it's a fabulous company. And functionally, why we decided to go with them, they're a subscription service that's mostly targeting non-businesses, although we're one of their first business clients. And they plant a certain number of trees for a subscription per month. We basically partnered with them for a more direct relationship. Reason we did this was because they maximize their impact at every single level of the partnership. So first of all, down to the trees they select, they plant mangroves, which absorb a very large amount of carbon emissions once mature, which takes about 8 to 10 years. Mangroves specifically are unlikely to be impacted by wildfires or natural disasters because they're on the coastline, in the wetlands, not going to catch on fire, or it's very unlikely. And they're also very deep root systems, so it's deep into the soil. And on top of that, beyond the actual carbon benefits, they create habitats for local fisheries, which benefits the local economy. They reinforce the actual sediment on the beaches and protect the coastline from natural disasters, tidal waves, tsunamis, so on, from erosion over time. And Ecology works very closely with local communities to ensure that the trees are not just going to get chopped down. Because the last thing we want is our players trust us with a bunch of money, and then the trees just get chopped down, so we have to plant more trees and rinse and repeat, and it benefits no one. On top of that, they're also very transparent, so unlike some charities, we're not guessing as to what our impact's actually doing. We can go through on these spreadsheets that are available to everyone online in their FAQs and see every tree that's planted, all of their minutes to their board meetings, all the carbon offset initiatives, and even the total amount of revenue that they've generated for the past several years. So it's completely transparent on every step of the process. And then finally, I like that they have an API. It means that there's less manual work on our end in order to actually ensure that there's a link between our players and the service. It creates a very direct relationship between our players. As they do an action in game, they can go online and immediately see it taking place in Ecology. So functionally, how the integration works for us is our player completes some sort of action or monetizes in-game. We do some checks via our anti-cheat system that we set up through LeanPlum, and then send it over to the Ecology API, which sends it directly to Ecology, and within a day, everything's starting to get planted. So, okay, we have our cause, we have our partner, we know what we want to do and who we want to do it with. What are we actually doing? That's kind of an important thing. So when we're doing any feature, especially on this scale, there are sort of two decisions to make. First of all is how you're going to do it, and second of all is how long are you going to do it for. So we're going to tackle the time one first. You can never do this on a permanent basis, which is a lengthier undertaking, which is re-theming your entire game to a degree towards this, which is what we chose to do on Terragenesis. Or you can do this as a limited time event, and so something that's a little bit lower cost that you do on a short-term basis. So limited time event, what are you going to think about here? Well, you're not going to make an entire new feature just for this limited time event just to benefit the world. That's a lot of cost, a lot of energy. It'd be engineers, art resources, reworking your entire content pipeline. So what you instead want to do is, what do you have already? You have to utilize your existing live operations infrastructure to build this feature out. So how do you run the normal events? Can you, if you're a match 3 game, is there a side mode that you run periodically? Can you just make that every player who completes that? We plant a tree for you. That's very simple and easy to do. That doesn't require huge effort to you, other than just some communication to the player. Can you repurpose existing features? So examples of that, Brawl Stars from Supercell, for example, back in 2020, they introduced a Koala Nita skin, which was meant to help the Australian wildfires. So 85% of the revenue generated from this skin was sent to the Australian government. And that's a really easy form because it's works within their content pipeline. They're making skins all the time, just requires art resources, and overall doesn't cost them anything other than the resources to develop it. And a new one, mostly just a game that I love playing, is Horizon Forbidden West. So Sony did a promotion, which is for the first month of the game's release, anyone who completes the tutorial will plant a tree for you. And it's another very easy thing for you to do, which is just set a goal in the game and say, if number of players who complete this, we will plant a tree. And you can communicate it again in just messaging around the game. Now, if you want to go the more complicated route, which I love doing and I propose, you want to follow, basically it's a permanent feature in your game. You want to follow the exact same procedure that you would for any permanent feature in your game, which is, what need does this actually fulfill for my player? Why does my player care about it beyond the fact that we're doing good for the world? How does it fit within the player loop? What are we doing to direct the player towards it? And what KPIs is this actually going to uplift aside from planting trees, which can be a KPI? So what we did in Terragenesis is we identified for a long time now that we don't have many progression points beyond completing levels. And so we wanted to introduce a more permanent progression system as well. And we've done this in various ways throughout the years. In addition, we wanted to add an additional currency that we can use to give out in bundles and as rewards beyond our hard currency. So those are the two player needs that we had, to make bundles more interesting and to provide long-term progression. So we came up with the My Forest feature. And so basically what it is it's a forest, very obviously. It is a bunch of rows of trees that the player plants, and you can see very visually the actual impact that you're having on the world and see it grow over time as you progress through the game. They plant trees for acquiring carbon impact currency. So we'll get into the exact sources of those later on. And then once you have enough currency, you plant the tree, the API sends the call out to ecology, who will then plant the tree in the real world. And on top of that, we reinforce it through rewards. So every 4 trees the player plants, we give you a very small in-game reward. That's just a few hard currency, maybe a character, to sweeten the deal, as it were, for the player and give them an actual reason beyond altruistically helping the planet. And we also do some fun animation stuff, which is we change the background. So here you can see destroyed, awful climate disaster planet. And then when you've planted 1 tree, snow goes away, the sky becomes a little bit clearer, buildings are a little bit less destroyed. You plant a 2nd tree, again, or 10 trees, cleaner atmosphere, more trees, the buildings get a little bit rougher. Then we get to blue skies, a little bit greener grass, when we get to 80 trees, and then finally we get to this beautiful metropolis when you've planted around 250 trees with clear skies and sort of pushing towards the future. So again, we reinforce this through visuals for the player as well. So, okay, we've talked about the duration. How do we actually make sure that this is profit neutral so that our CEOs and finance team don't come down on us and say, guys, why are we spending hundreds of thousands of dollars benefiting the planet, which is not helping our bottom line? Go turn it off, which is a conversation I would very much like to avoid. So there are 2 ways to do that, one of which is more direct than the other. First of all is you can just make it very one-to-one. Your player spends $1, we spend $1 on planting trees. Very simple. You can do that either via IAPs or ads, because then other people are paying. You can tie it to a certain percentage, you can make a specific bundle, there's a lot of customizability there. And the benefits of this strategy is it's very easy to not cost you any money. It's very clear the exact mitigation points are. The only risk really is that it might cannibalize your existing IAPs in some areas or your existing ad placements. So you're going to need to do a lot of A/B testing. We did about 3 months of A/B testing for this feature. Yeah, something like that, to get everything just right to where it's not actually costing us money. Then the engagement. This is the little bit trickier route, which is you want to tie it to milestones or events in the game. So you can do an achievement system where if the player reaches level 20, you plant a tree in the real world. Level 40, so on. You could do a limited time event, as we saw earlier in the match 3 example. Yeah, there are a few different ways to do that. And instead of motivating the player to progress via in-game rewards, you're providing a higher motivation for playing the game, which is benefiting the world and being a good person. It's a little bit more difficult here to tie in the direct monetization aspect because it's not direct. So what you're going for really is a retention play, which will hopefully extend your LTV by keeping users around for longer periods. Or you tie it into directly to difficult events, which will monetize because they are difficult, which you already know are monetizing because of that. So there is a little bit more of a risk there that you're going to have to be very careful with, but if carefully managed, you should be successful. So what did we actually do in Terragenesis? Where are you getting this carbon impact currency? So you're going to get it from their specific IAPs, specific bundles in the game, which give away only that currency. So this is for the true altruists that really just want to plant trees. Then we also give it a very small portion away in our hard currency packs as well. So maybe 1 to 5 per pack, which is a very small amount, to sort of have an added bonus to our existing IAPs. Then we have an ad placement, which will give away a certain amount of the currency. We balance this based on the eCPM of the ad placement because of different countries have different eCPMs on average. So, for example, US will give away more of the currency than in Brazil because US ads are more valuable to us. I mean, the goal is profit neutrality. And then finally, in our difficult limited time events, we give it away in end milestones of those as well, so that the user has to complete the very difficult monetizing end event to get the currency. Okay, we've talked about the cause, partner, feature, we're all ready to go. How do we actually make sure that the player understands this is what it does, we're actually benefiting the world, we are good people? Because they have a lot on their mind. We are asking a lot of our players all the time and trying to pull their attention in a dozen different directions. They're getting push notifications from other games to go play those. They're trying to get messages from their friends who are like, why are you playing games? Come help us and hang out. How do we actually make sure that they not only understand this feature, but that this isn't just a feature in the game, it's actually benefiting the world? And that's a difficult little proposition to make. The simplest version, these are some quick tips. You need to tutorialize it as you would with any feature. Walk the player through what it actually is. How detailed and direct a tutorial you want to do is up to you and what works best in your UX flow. You're probably going to want to reinforce it with notification badges, call to actions to drag the player's attention back to it periodically to make sure that they don't forget it completely. And the only real odd thing here is you're going to want to get your players out of your app. I know we spend most of our time trying to keep our players in our apps and keep them engaged with us. You need to direct them to the website of the charity that you're partnering with so that they actually have a very clear connection between your game and the charity, and get them out there and to understand it. It's a little bit more difficult and different than you would in a normal game. And then on top of that, you're going to want to leverage all of your social media channels to be also engaging them on the community and social side as well to reach your most engaged players. And in all of this communication at every step in the process, you need to repeat and repeat and repeat and repeat that this is a real world thing. When we plant trees in Terragenesis, we're not just doing a cool little side feature where you plant trees. You're actually planting real world trees here, not just a side animation. So how do we do that in Terragenesis? Well, the top little screenshot is a pop-up that we show pretty early on in the game. So we give away about 15 carbon impact points at the start of the game, just for installing the game. Then about 3 to 5 sessions in, we explain, here's what carbon impact points are after you've learned the basics of the game. And here's what carbon impact points are, here's where you earn them, here's the fact that we're partnered with this ecology service, here's photos of the tree planting actually in process, and it's realistic, actual real-life photos, not matching the animation in the game itself to further emphasize that this is something outside the game in the real world. And then once you've actually acquired 30 carbon impact points and are ready to plant your first tree, then it will walk you through a more detailed tutorial of taking you through, here's where you plant the tree, here's the animation that plays, here's the real world impact part, and then we have a little tooltip if you forget any of that stuff, because players forget or rapidly tap through things and don't read. That breaks it all down again. And then we also have a button on the top left, which is the global stats button, which takes you directly to our ecology website, where you can see all the trees planted by all of the Terra Genesis players over all time, which is about 540,000 so far. And it also doubles as a referral link, so we get extra trees if you sign up based on that. So everyone should go in and sign up based on our referral link. And then beyond the actual in-game stuff, we emphasize it on our social pages. So we did a big promotion on our social pages when we first introduced the feature. Then we give the players regular updates on how many trees they are planting throughout the various stages. We use memes, because memes are fabulous, on actually educating the player on how the feature works and engaging them with it. And then I love my community manager, had the genius idea of the treater board, which is a leaderboard of trees. We run a competition with our community every month or so. That's a week long, and it's a competition for who can plant the most trees in a given week. And it's a lot of fun. We call it the treater board, and it's a great way to engage your community and get them to really rally behind the feature. Okay, so we've gotten our feature, we've gotten all that right. Did we as Terra Genesis actually succeed in this whole idea of profit neutrality and leveraging our audience for social good? Well, we planted a lot of trees, at the very least, which I'm very proud of, even if we did massively fail in any other aspect, which we didn't. Yeah, just having planted a huge number of trees, it took us 6 months to plant 500,000 trees or so. We slowed down towards the end as players adopted and were like, oh, okay, this is cool. We saw a large adoption at the beginning and then petered out a little bit over time. But yeah, that's an awesome achievement that I think, and I'm really proud of the team for the whole feature. But did it, again, actually gain us anything? Or did it actually hurt us in the overall picture? So on the left, you can see the pre-ecology stats. On the right, you can see the post-ecology stats. And the overall speech on the left side there is the IAP. And you can see that's only about a 2 to 4% increase. It really isn't a huge amount. Not many people are actually breaking out their wallets and spending large sums of money. On the ad side, however, we saw about a 10 to 15% uplift based on ad engagement and ads watched per DAU without cannibalizing our existing placement. So it performed as an additive bonus. And that's pretty awesome. So my theory here, now I have only gotten to test this in Terra Genesis, so I haven't gotten to see more hardcore games. We make about 50% of our money in ads, 50% of our money in IAP. So I want to test this in a more hardcore game that's more IAP driven. But my theory is that people are more likely to spend their time than money on given charity features. You're more likely to sign a petition that costs you about maybe 5 minutes to sign up for a petition to go bug the government and have someone else do something than you are to actually spend your money on something. And so that's something that I want to test in other games. So if anyone ever does anything like this, let me know. But did we achieve net neutral profitability? Well, to see that, we need to run through the math. So on average, our users plant about 1 tree per 2 users, a little bit more. And it costs us 18 cents per tree. So overall, the cost per install is 10 cents. So we can break it down on the right there. We see the LTV, that was an uplift just based on our ecology ad placements. Adds up to about 9 cents or so. And then on the IAP side, again, it's about 2 cents, so fairly small on the IAP side. But it gives us a 1 cent install margin that's profiting, and that we mostly have for, supporting the engineers who integrated the feature and our own maintenance costs for making sure that the whole feature runs smoothly and the community support for it. So it's not really profit. So we did it, yay. So what we've talked about is, yeah, we've managed to integrate a feature that benefits the overall world, doesn't cost us money. My CEO's not gonna come and tell me to turn it off anytime soon that I know of. Yeah, it's pretty fantastic. And so what I want you guys to leave here, this presentation with, is how to think about it on your end and how to integrate these sorts of things as well. To think about what the cause is, needs to be what your players care about, not what you care about. And you find that out via the survey or tying it to the theme of your game. And then finding a partner that will work as a good custodian for your players' money and time. Because again, this is about your players' money, not your money. and making sure that this feature is profit neutral so that you can do it over a prolonged period of time. And that's either deciding to do it on a limited time basis or a permanent basis, and either making it to a monetizing feature or going purely for long-term LTV growth through retention. And then finally, just repeatedly messaging it to your player, bashing them over the head with the fact that they are actually doing something good for the world, not just having fun in a game, although they are doing that as well. And if you do all that, you end up with doing a lot of good for the planet and benefiting not just your players who feel like they're doing a great time, your team because you are super motivated because you are doing something good for the world, not just lining your own pockets, and the world as a whole. And yeah, although if you do want to do something that's not profit neutral, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. Cool, that's it. I'm done. Anyone have? Thank you, thank you. There are some mics here, or you can shout really loudly if anyone has any questions.
Hi, great talk. Thanks for sharing your experience with the tree planting project.
No problem.
Very excited about that. Could you maybe talk about maybe the quantified carbon emissions that are embedded in that number of trees planted? Was that part of what ecology does? Do they measure that? And I guess, does that tree planting cover the emissions of players themselves?
Okay, so making sure that we're actually covering the emissions of the phones that are actually playing the game and generating this.
Yeah.
So it's the reason I didn't talk a huge amount about specific carbon emissions is there's a lot of different stats in a lot of different areas. So that's why I emphasize the reforestation part of it. It's hard to measure the exact amount of carbon emissions played by the game. It's something I'm working on right now, actually. Over the course of the next few weeks, I'm trying to go in and see, okay, this is exactly how much time is being played, this is how much the battery life would cost, and so on. Overall, we do try and emphasize I think one tree, I'm trying to remember the stats off the top of my head. It's some like 30,000 units of carbon emissions, but it takes a little bit of time for them to reach maturity, which is the problem. Of course, one tree will end up planting 5 trees because they spawn out extra. So I think it ultimately adds out to be neutral, but that is something that you need to think about.
Hello, thank you for the talk. So my question is about the part where you ask players a survey. So does that, I guess that means that it's something that you need to bake into your game to make it make sense, like the charity that you want to give to? And like how, let me see if I can rephrase this question more clearly. What if you can't think of a gameplay mechanic to match the thing that you found in the survey that your players want to give charity to?
So in terms of how the survey works is you run an interstitial in the game that basically says, hey guys, we know you were playing the game, we appreciate you playing the game, thanks so much. Can you answer us a few simple questions to help us make your game experience better? The same way you'd run a lot of different surveys. You either do that via an interstitial, or you can throw it into an in-app message in an inbox if your game supports inboxes. You can see this a lot in Genshin Impact is constantly asking me to fill out surveys. Yeah, so that's how you do the survey side of things, and you list out, you can do pre-listed options of the causes, or you can leave an other section as well at the end to let them write in their own cause. In terms of, let me remember, if you don't have a gameplay mechanic that matches the cause you want to support, it depends how much you want to tie things together and what your game is. So you could just do an IAP. For example, Brawl Stars doesn't have any in-game mechanics really that support or that relate to wildfires, too directly at least. However, they have a skin that they can retheme to be related to the Australian wildfires or Australian themed. And they can use that to tie the player's mind to, okay, this is a koala, koalas are from Australia, it's supporting Australian wildfires. So it's a clearer connection. Yeah, so that's what you do. You find sort of creative ways to work around the issue if you don't want to do a full gameplay aspect of it.
First of all, just congratulations, 500,000 trees. That's really amazing. I was intrigued by your comment about the non-monetary actions that perhaps we could incentivize players to participate in. And just off the top of my head, I'm thinking like flash mob protests, plant a tree yourself, clean up a river, take pictures. But then I'm thinking that adds so much more, verification and all that. So I was just hoping you could speak a little bit more about that.
So the non-monetizing aspects are a little bit more difficult. We saw some increase in our long-term retention, but there are a few things that happened around our UA that made me not want to throw that in the slides directly, just to be very clear about the data and have very clear directions, because it is a little bit more murky in overall aspects. Yeah, it's a little bit more complicated. You need to judge basically long-term retention. Is your D30, is your D90 retention increasing? And compare that with the earlier cohorts. And on top of that, you need to also make sure that your LTV isn't dropping as a result. So it's possible that you introduce this feature, it's great, it's cool, but people are stopping spending on other areas of the game. And sure, or maybe they are sticking around longer, but they're not actually monetizing the longer they stay, and it's not actually benefiting you overall. So those are the sort of things that you need to watch when you're doing the data analysis side of things. I think you said something about flash mobs and real world impact of things. That's a cool idea I didn't think about. If you could somehow incentivize your players to come up with real things in the actual world to do. I hadn't thought about that, so I'm going to steal that idea later. I think I am out of time, but you can grab me afterward if you want to ask any more questions and bug me. But yeah, thanks everyone for coming.